welcome to the third episode of our new podcast series, The Wealth Mosaic in Conversation. Once again, I'm Stephen Wall, founder of the Wealth Mosaic. In this episode, recorded in New York, the day after our Wealth Tech 2026 event in partnership with EY, I speak to Ian Karnell, CEO and co-founder of VastAdvisor, an AI-powered growth platform helping RIAs, broker-dealers, and enterprise wealth firms build scalable, compliant, and sustainable client acquisition systems. Ian talks to me about his background as a serial entrepreneur alongside his twin brother, the backdrop, focus and aims of VastAdvisor, the benefits it will bring to the market, and some of the wider trends he sees at play around the US wealth management sector. So thanks again to Ian for the time, both for this conversation and his participation in Wealth Tech 2026. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Ian, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. We talked a little bit offline about this building. Do you want to give a start to that?
Man.
And then we can get into a little bit more about the career background. So where we are and what it means to you.
Yeah, so we're right off of Avenue of the Americas and 42nd Street. We're at the Grace Building. And one of the most iconic architectural buildings, I think, in Manhattan. But certainly if you've spent any time meandering down 42nd Street or Avenue of the Americas, you can't help notice the Grace Building and just how it stands out architecturally. It's one of the most beautiful buildings, I think, in Manhattan. And as a college student, I did some work for a non-governmental organization at the United Nations, and a New Jersey senator. And so I was living in New Jersey. I was taking the bus into Port Authority, and I would on a daily basis just make my way from the Hudson over to the UN, and always walk past the Grace Building. And it always just stood out. It was such a beautiful building. And that was over 40 years ago, or 38 years ago. 40 years ago, I guess now. And it's so great, like when I looked at the address today and I realized this is where we were recording the podcast, I was delighted. I've never been inside the building. I've always walked past it. And so what a special moment thank you for hosting it here. What a special moment.
Well, we're pleased to. And of course, it's a coincidence. And we should thank Brunswick PR for the
Yes.
privilege, right? And Nick Rice for hosting us.
Yeah, absolutely. What an amazing PR company. Holy cow.
Yeah, there you go.
Incredible. There you go. What an incredible PR company.
One of the best. One of the best.
Yep.
So do you just want to give us a little background to yourself and where you've got to, your career to date, and a little bit of an introduction to VastAdvisor and what you're doing in the wealth management space? How you got into the wealth management space, first of all?
Yeah, well, that's a great story. So the very first, started an identical twin brother, Jeremy, and he and I have been entrepreneurial wingmen our entire lives. And so so our very first startup we graduated in 93 to date ourselves, but our very first startup was one of the first generation digital agencies in the United States. We were based out of Boston. And one of our first major Fortune 500 accounts that we became digital agency of record for was this small little company by the name of State Street. I didn't even know what a custodian was back then. and we pitched the business alongside IBM and Accenture, and we won the digital agency business. IBM won, they were responsible for doing all the back end, and Accenture was responsible for the strategy, essentially. And so, but it was really amazing to kind of sit alongside these giants during, the early days of digital transformation, before it was called digital transformation. We built the very first StateStreet.com. We were their digital agency for over a decade. David Spina was the CEO. Debbie Mallins was the chief marketing officer. Stephen Dill was running digital for State Street. Ron Logue was just launching Spiders for the first time at SSGA. Yep. And so it was just a great time to be to have a startup at the very beginning of this new, this new economy that we were going into, and working with really, a traditional firm in wealth, like one of the most traditional firms in wealth, who was doing some of the most innovative things in digital during that time. And you have to think about, like, Y2K was spinning up, and digital was hitting the scene, and State Street was making significant investments, not just in, kind of how they were building out their architecture, but I mean, they made an investment into our little startup. And so they put $1 million investment into our startup above and beyond the multi-million-dollar retainer that we had won with them. And it was just, that's what launched my brother and I into wealth. 30 plus years ago was State Street. In many ways, our career has been defined by that relationship by State Street. And so fast forward, we had built one of the larger digital agencies in the United States at that point, and we had exited from that. And we stayed in big data, we stayed in wealth, and our most recent wealth tech venture, we sold about 3 years ago to Envestnet. It was a company by the name of Truelytics.
I remember it well.
Yeah. And we were helping RIAs and enterprise platforms measure the intrinsic value of a practice and across like 150 different key performance indicators. And one of the key performance indicators is the reason that we're here today as VastAdvsior's. One of those KPIs was related to organic growth. And one of the metrics just jumped out at us, and it was clear. We had 40,000 firms on platform when we sold to Envestnet. So we had significant data at scale that was measuring all of these different KPIs and looking at growth metrics and valuation metrics. But that organic growth metric really jumped out, because what we noticed was that firms that had systematized organic growth, not just relied on referrals that were organic and relationships that you don't really own and you can't turn it on instantly, or firms that were reliant on buying third-party leads from lead brokers like Smart Asset, but had systematized growth so that it was organic growth, so that it was predictable, scalable, and repeatable, were valued almost consistently across the board at 200% more than firms that hadn't systematized that was just taking an ad hoc approach to growth, which is a lot of this industry. This industry has spent over 30 years perfecting systems for asset growth and have done nothing to invest or perfect systems for asset acquisition from an organic perspective. And that's the void that we're looking to fill with VastAdvsior's. That led us all the way to here.
I think in a previous conversation today, in building the vendor directory in those 3,000 firms and the sort of about 7,000 solutions, one of the big areas that we just saw, we weren't doing any systematic analysis at this point, but I was saying there's no tools out there that support growth, organic growth, client discovery, There's a lot of tools to support once you've got the client and you know who they are and they're on board and they're in the relationship and all that piece. There's nothing out there to help you find them, to help you discover where they are, who they are, or if there is, it's very archaic, outdated, right? It's certainly not systemized, like you say. So one of the big areas, and I think organic growth is clearly an issue for the industry, right? I remember my first time in the wealth space, we were doing work in sort of around intermediaries. So this was in the UK. Speak to ex-private bank, and they'd have a relationship with a law firm, with a trust firm, with an accounting firm. But it was hugely at risk, and it didn't seem very dynamic. It's like, is there not a little bit more to this? No, there's not much more to this at all.
That's right.
Fantastic. So, what sort of clients are you looking to service? Who are you looking to work with in the space? Why are they going to work with you? What's going to open the doors?
Right. We have two segments of clients that we target. Our primary segment that we focus on are wealth enterprises and asset managers. Predominantly, practice management teams or growth teams within those enterprises that are looking to, what they're always looking for. They're looking to accelerate assets on platform. They're looking to retain assets on platform, and they're looking to differentiate themselves. And so, I think the leading enterprise wealth platforms and managers make a pretty consistent effort to invest in wealth tech that is truly innovative, that will help them differentiate themselves and make a difference for the RIAs within their networks. And so that's a huge one for us. And think about the fact that because this architecture has never existed, how little data we actually have at a network level with respect to organic growth. They could certainly measure, I think, strategic growth, and there are a number of platforms that are doing that. But with respect to organic growth, if they had network-wide intelligence around their network-wide ideal client profiles that the network should be targeting, and being able to crowdsource that intelligence, the ability to measure at a firm level, to a regional level, to a network level, how your organic growth rate is compounding over time and what's driving that compounding effect over time. Having that intelligence is massive, right? And delivering that intelligence to your network is highly differentiated and will drive accelerated AUM growth. And by doing that, you're gonna by default retain assets on platforms. So that's a huge opportunity for us. And that's one of the use cases at the enterprise level. When you think of managers, you think of multiple use cases. We help managers drive organic growth as well. So their ability to be able to target advisors within broker dealers that are using certain models, and specifically marketing to them. So you're augmenting your relationship management teams with programmatic, hyper-targeted messaging within your broker dealers, within advisors who are using, let's say a DFA model in your BlackRock, and you want them to start to consider BlackRock models. We can now start driving that growth programmatically, that will support relationship managers in a very different way than what they've done traditionally. So that's one big segment for us, and that's a primary focus for us. And then we have, and we built our tool specifically for that segment as well. So we have enterprise onboarding tools that make it easy for these enterprises to deploy our application across the network. We built in both compliance and governance at the architectural level. This is why enterprises can deploy us. So the SEC has mandated if you're using AI for marketing, you're going to be a priority from an audit perspective because of AI washing, right? And so you need to have a tool that has governance and compliance built into the architecture, not policy, so that you have AI telemetry, you're observing AI, you're recording, you're auditing every single AI decision from every agent, sub-agent, workflow. We can do that. We can do that at scale. Obviously, we have our SOC 2 compliance and other, we just check every single one of the boxes for an enterprise to be able to deploy us. And then we have benchmarking and dashboards for the practice management teams to surface all of that intelligence. And then we have, and it's all powered by an advisor intelligence loop. And so we didn't build a marketing, I had no interest in building a marketing platform. That's not what we built. We built a growth intelligence tool, an operating system that gets smarter with every signal that we see, every campaign that's run, every ideal client profile that's generated on our platform, every result, every compliance audit done. We have through our generative compliance integration, our innovation, I should say, within the tool, helps the tool become smarter, better, more effective. So that's hugely powerful. I think where AI is going, I think that's going to become necessary. The other segment are RIAs, and we have subscriptions and we base our subscriptions based on AUM bands, whereas our enterprise subscriptions are based on network size bands. So there's slightly different models there. But so we have a subscription for that solo two-man RIA, the starter subscription. It's like $799 a month, all the way up to a single brand, $6 billion plus AUM RIA. That's at $9,999 a month, right? We call that our elite subscription. We have a couple of different subscription tiers in between. And so we have, and we built our tool to be, specific to an RIA. So we have a direct to RIA subscription model as well. So we're attacking both.
If you look at me as a tech laggard and just think I don't know anything about, or I know very little about how this stuff is built, can you give us a little bit of an insight into how this stuff is built now and the speed at which you can deploy it compared to, we heard a lot of it yesterday, if I was doing this 10 years ago, it would cost me X and it would take me so long, and now I can do it in a tenth, a hundredth, or whatever the time frame is of the commitment. What's going on to get this stuff out the door quickly now for you? Yeah,
so and understand, like there's a whole vibe coding, kind of hype thing that's going on, and it's not wrong, right? You can utilize apps like Base44 and a bunch of other apps that you can prompt into some really beautiful application design and features and functions. Designing an app using AI is one thing. Deploying it is an entirely different thing. the back end of that app, the integrations that you need to architect within that app, the regulatory constraints that you have to keep in mind in deploying an app, and whether or not your market will use it because of whether, what you did or didn't do to satisfy governance and compliance requirements. And so those are two very different things, right? And so we have a 5-6 person full-time engineering team that is working and built an AI-first, AI-native platform. And so we have built AI scaffolding that allows us to rapidly develop millions of lines of code, review that code, test that code in very sophisticated development environments before it even gets pushed over to production. And so there's a very rigid process that we go through in how we leverage AI. Now, what we've accomplished in a year would have taken traditionally 2 to 3 years to accomplish. It has radically reduced the time to market. Still a significant investment. And so this isn't like a one-person team using Base 44 to deploy a production-ready app. I mean, we built an enterprise deployable app that's very sophisticated, and it's taken, significant investments of both time and human resources to get it to where it's at. But what we're seeing is that our product development roadmap is every week it gets compressed. Every week we're seeing the ability because we built the scaffolding the right way, we're seeing our agents accelerate our weekly sprint cycles are now being compressed into daily sprint cycles, and we're pushing out to production almost every single day, new features, new updates, and the code is self-healing, and there's so many attributes that within the framework, the tooling that we utilize to build to build the operating system that didn't exist before, that didn't exist a year ago, let alone 2 years ago. And so, first movers are going to, I think, maintain a significant advantage in the marketplace. Yes, it's easy to go and replicate an app on the surface level. It will be very difficult to replicate the back end of that app, and even more difficult to replicate how you're fine-tuning the AI, because I think data will continue to be the most significant moat. Fine-tune models and how you're fine-tuning your AI on your specific data set so that it's driving intelligence as part of the growth architecture. That's the biggest moat that you can have, and that will be the hardest thing to replicate. So that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, and the moat thing is interesting. It is the fundamentals, it's the architecture, it's the foundation. The front end can be as beautiful as whatever, but that's just the interface, isn't it? That's right. It's what behind it, it's what is beneath the surface that is really important. I have a question for you now, but I also want to ask you a separate question at the same time. What I hear a lot now is that the vendor marketplace is moving at a certain speed. It's getting faster and faster. As you just mentioned, the deployment times are quicker and quicker. The industry itself, however, is not moving at that speed in most instances or all instances. So where are you in terms of market deployment, engagement, and how do you manage this difference in speed between what you might do as a small startup entrance into the market and what a big entity can kind of live with?
Two great questions. So to answer the first question, we shipped VastAdvisor Enterprise, our V1.0, at Futureproof Citywide, where we were on stage doing the demo drop. And we had a pretty significant wait list of firms that were interested in subscribing once we shipped. And so we have gone through multiple waves of inviting those waitlist RIAs onto the platform. We have won one of the largest RIAs, I'm not going to name them, but one of the largest RIAs in the United States awarded us the business. They spend millions and millions of dollars each year buying leads from companies like Smart Asset. And so that was a huge win for us. We're going through our procurement process with them right now. And we are spinning up a proof of concepts with some of the largest enterprises in wealth. So on the manager side, we are going through InfoSec with Envestnet. Envestnet's family. They acquired our last company, and we're working very closely with them. And just as a side note, when I look at the top 8 fastest growing and largest RIAs in the United States, when I say fast 30% CAGR plus. Every single one of them is on the Envestnet stack. Every single one of them. That was an interesting insight.
Yep.
And so we're prioritizing our integration with Tamarac and MoneyGuide Pro and other capabilities that Envestnet has within its stack to complement that and bring the growth intelligence and the growth operating system. So if the top 8 fastest growing RIAs are all leveraging Envestnet. That's great. What can we do to further systematize their growth rate, accelerate that growth rate, and accelerate assets onto Tamarac? And so that's really exciting for us. And like I said, Envestnet is an amazing company. They're family, and so we're going to continue to prioritize integrations there. So we're at Elevate, we are going to open up. We have our pricing on our site today. You can actually go and sign up today. So we're not constraining that anymore, but we're not also shouting from the rooftops from a go-to-market perspective. We're doing that intentionally. It's not about maximizing MRR, ARR at this point. For us, it's very much about taking a thoughtful approach to onboarding these waves of clients that have been on the wait list that we've invited into the platform, and listening to them and making sure that everything that we have built into the platform is working correctly. Client feedback will help us polish things and add to our product development and our feature sets. So that's really important. So we're listening a lot. We're being very slow and methodical. It has nothing to do. I don't care about MRR and ARR yet. Yeah, not to maximize that. It's not about that. It's about building the right.
So that comes later, right? You've got to get the product
later.
right.
Yeah. And so
you have to listen, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and so we have an enterprise grade product that has shipped, that is out. Enterprises are engaging with RIAs, large RIAs. We have multi-billion AUM RIAs engaging us, all the way down to the $500 million, $250 million in AUM RIAs engaging us. So that's kind of where we are, and we'll continue to accelerate our go-to-markets between Elevate, which is in a few weeks, and Phoenix, and beyond that. So that's when you're going to really start to see. We'll be at Schwab Impact. We're going to be at Future Proof in Huntington Beach. We'll be at Advise AI on stage there, and we're going to continue to ramp our go-to-market across all the major wealth events going into 2027. With respect to your second question, I think the industry will always lag, yes, AI has accelerated everything from a wealth tech startup perspective. If you built it, the onus is on us to build tools that the enterprise feels safe incorporating. It has to, solve a problem, right? I think we're articulating a very powerful value proposition with respect to the problem that we're solving. Like, the growth architecture just doesn't exist. Not like I want to present to the wealth industry a growth operating system that becomes as important as CRMs were 20 years ago, right? And so that's kind of what we're building. But it has to check the governance boxes. It has to check the compliance boxes. It has to check the security boxes. And we've done all of those things. And so if you've done those things, you've made those investments, and that's part of your tooling, that's part of your architecture, it'll become a lot easier for enterprises to, go through their procurement and their InfoSec processes to get comfortable with your tooling within their stack and deploy you. So, yeah.
But it's also true that vendors need to lead the market, right? It is your job to push them in terms of the direction of travel.
Yep.
But do you feel the lag in terms of where you are and where they are is bigger now, or is it that's just a factor of the market, and regardless of the gap?
Yeah, I don't.
It doesn't really matter.
I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think there are TAMPs and platforms in the market that absolutely feel the urgency and the need to articulate an AI value proposition that's complementary to what they're doing, and obviously being innovative is a differentiator. If you're wanting to attract assets and retain assets on platform, you can't be on your back foot in today's market. And so I think that does translate. I mean, I just read an article about how BlackRock has transformed, from an AI perspective. And so, I think with all things follow BlackRock, and if they're investing in certain things, and if they're, be it, AI or crypto, then it's, likely an important investment to make and a priority to set for, within your own enterprise. And so BlackRock's always a good bellwether as to who to follow.
Obviously, you're focusing on growth,
Yep.
but when you look more broadly across the industry, are there other topics that stand out to you as like really in play for the industry to either tackle, whether it be a challenge or an opportunity?
Yeah. Well, and I think all impacted because of what AI is doing to the industry. And so I think in the next 2 to 3 years, I think what AGI will represent to the industry will be the acceleration of fee compression, right? So we need to prepare for that. I think that's really important to understand. I think it will commoditize advice in very real ways, right? And so I think firms are going to have to think very differently about their value proposition beyond advice into coaching and things that some of the AI first or AI native RIAs that we see today are really being thoughtful about that. Yeah. And I think with respect to growth, I think it's going to be very different. If you're just a marketing platform, you're going to, and you're not building, fine-tuned AI and intelligence loops that can drive automation in the way that you define your audiences and activate those audiences, you're going to be on your back foot as well. And so, so I think, and I think that firms that aren't looking at data seriously, I think one of the trends I wouldn't be shocked to see over the next 3 years are RIAs hiring data scientists as part of their teams, right? Yep. We haven't seen that historically. But I mean, it was one of the very first moves that we made as a company. Dr. Edo Araldi, excuse me. He was somebody I've been in business with before. I met him when he was a professor of statistical analysis at Harvard, and he's leading our data team. And I wouldn't be surprised to see RIAs begin to embrace data scientists as part of their team, because your models are going to become really important. It's going to become what differentiates you, what represents your core value proposition.
I remember, I'm not sure if it was related to our Swiss event or just generally being in Switzerland and talking to the private banks. The obvious names, again, without naming the names, if you know the Swiss market, you know who the names are. Yep. They were talking about hiring data scientists and saying, well, it's very difficult for us as a traditional, boring industry to hire data scientists. They want to work elsewhere. Is Wealth cool enough now to bring on board the capacity of... Yeah, there's the distinction.
Wealth tech is, right? So you're going to... And I think that will become, at least early on, will become a driver for who to adopt into your stack as a firm. If you don't have access to the data scientists directly, well, then they'll be part of who you decide to include into your stack. Yep. Like the smart ones will. Like that would be one of the questions I ask. If I'm looking at a growth tool within my stack, who's on your team? Yep. And what are they doing as part of your team? We're building fine-tuned AI models to drive advisor intelligence loops, backed by the leading minds in causal analysis and inference modeling on the planet, right? And so you can access by default those capabilities, those individuals, through the tools that you include on your stack, at least early on. I think later it's going to be, that's going to be part of how you differentiate yourself, your value proposition. Now, I'm really bullish on this next generation of CEOs of RIAs. I think they will meet the moment better than anybody. I really do. I'm more bullish than ever. Every time I talk to them, they're data savvy. They understand this is not a lifestyle business. They're thinking differently about growth than just referrals or buying leads and renting their growth out. And I think they are going, like Shannon Spotswood at RFG is a great example of this. I think she is an individual, she's meeting the moment, right? She is defining a new generation of RIA that has never existed before. And so I'm very proud of what she's doing and Ed is doing over at RFG. They're a great example. I think they're going to meet the moment.
This is an interesting thing. In fact, it came up yesterday, it came up this morning as well in terms of leadership and their technological capability and awareness. So you're saying that that's really, it's changing.
Yeah, it's changing. And I think they'll attract the right people. They just will, right? And so, look at the people on Shannon's team over at RFG. That's a great example, right? And so if you look at her team and why they're at RFG, it's going to be because of her, right? And the type of leadership and the vision that she's articulating in the marketplace. And so I think that'll become foundational, like it is for any business. And then the culture that you're actually, and that's defined by the CEO. You'll be able to attract who you need to attract to build, like the data scientists ultimately.
Yeah. Another interesting point, and when we're not going off track, but there was a data point yesterday, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a very high percentage of advisors are, of a certain age and they'll be retiring in the next 10 years, right? Creating a big issue for the industry in terms of the demand for advice and how to service it, and therefore driving needs of tech and all that stuff. We often also hear about the profile, the skill profile of the future advisor being more tech savvy and so on and so forth. So I think, a lot of them, well, there was another point yesterday that they don't even use tech. I can't remember if it was on stage or a private conversation. It's like, there's all this tech and they don't even use it because they've been using Excel and, they write stuff down and so on and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the future skill set of a financial advisor?
Yeah.
I mean, how you see that being?
Yeah, when you look at what's going on with intergenerational wealth transfer, right? You have $84 trillion changing hands to digital first generations. Well, those digital first generations are also assuming the leadership roles of these RIAs. So that's exactly what I was just talking about, right? They have grown up with technology. They are very comfortable with technology. They are beyond just creating pivot tables in Excel. We see 90% usage of AI in firms today. There's a huge adoption curve that's going on today within AI. Now, that also represents significant risk if it's just generic AI. If you're,
It's like the WhatsApp story, right?
Right.
So they go outside of compliance boundaries because clients use it, that's the way to do it, but actually it's not mandated by the firm.
That's not mandated or managed or controlled from a governance perspective. And so that represents an existential risk to firms today, right? And so you have to, like now Claude and Claude Cowork, they have the ability to, configure those tooling with telemetry, and, you can keep that within your governance framework and make that safe for your advisors to leverage and to deploy. And I think smart firms are enabling their advisors to do that. They have to, because the future advisor, their skill set will have to align with the expectations of the investors that they're going to be interacting with. And that's a very different audience than their parents' investors or their grandparents. This audience behave, leverage technologies in ways that boomers could never even fathom, right? And so I think these are the most exciting times. And I think, like I said, this next generation of advisor is already there and they're meeting the moment. And we haven't seen enough succession yet with the current generation of advisors. I think that will happen, obviously, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely in play. It's exciting times. It's good to watch. And maybe not always participating, right? Watch from the sidelines and see how it plays out without the risk and the headaches of taking the journey directly. Right. So, Ian, as a final question, if you were to predict or look at the future of the wealth industry, and I know we can't go too far ahead, right? Because who knows where this industry is going, but 2 to 3 years out, what sort of predictions would you make? What things are we going to see?
Yeah, well, we spoke to some of them already. We're going to see fee compression. We're going to see the commoditization of advice. We're going to see the increasing importance of owning your first-party data, unifying data and owning your first-party data. Privacy is not very important under the current administration in the United States today, but we'll get back on track in the U.S. We already see what's happening in Europe with GDPR. California CCPA, there have been 13, 15, 20 states already that have embraced the CCPA-like privacy standard. And so I think that will get back on track again. And owning your first-party data, having permission is going to be important, right? And your ability to be able to drive growth and retention of your clients. So I think all of those things we'll see over the next 3 years. That broadly speaking, I think AGI is going to just change a lot in ways that we don't even understand yet. So artificial general intelligence, the ability for automating, especially knowledge-based work, is going to be something that becomes much more prevalent. And, we're seeing workforces impacted by this today with Oracle and others. I think we'll continue to see knowledge workers be impacted by this moving forward. And I think firms that are forecasting this and understanding how AGI is going to play a role in the market and specifically within wealth, I think are going to lead and navigate these very difficult waters ahead. If you haven't, I mentioned this yesterday on the panel at the event. If you haven't, take a look at AI-2027.com. That research written by a lot of the AI scientists that built Anthropic and OpenAI and forecasting when does superintelligence, when does AGI arrive. And then, just put the URL into your ChatGPT or your or Claude app and let it just summarize, because it's heavy research. Let it summarize it for you, and then just ask the question: how does this impact wealth management moving forward? And just read through the answers to that question. Let AI answer that for you, and then understand how, then there's a bunch of other follow-on questions that you should be asking on how to prepare for that as a firm. I think that's a good place to start in planning for the future.
I think we might need to have a stiff drink either before or after reading that report, right?
Always. Rule of thumb, always.
Well, Ian, thank you. Thank you for yesterday, for participating, and for the podcast today. Great to speak to you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Ian for the time, conversation, and background to both his wider journey and to VastAdvisor as a business and solution to the wealth management space. A serial and successful entrepreneur who once again is setting his sights on delivering impact in the wealth management space through the delivery of modern and relevant technology. We wish him well and imagine we'll be speaking to him again soon. So thank you all for listening in. More episodes of the podcast will be with you soon, so be on the lookout. Until the next time.